Okay, we're going to look at another kind of file I/O here. So I've got a spreadsheet here with some Christy names, surnames and some scores, 4 people in, typical Excel spreadsheet. It's LibreOffice, it doesn't matter. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a file save as. I'm going to save this as a CSV, a comma separated variable file called class list, and it's in this folder called file IO, which is on my desktop. So I'm going to save that there. It's got those 4 people in. The interesting thing now is we look at that file, and there it is, class list. If I now open it with Notepad, you can see how it's been saved. It's been saved with these commas between it. This is what we call a comma separated file. So the structure of Excel has been lost, other than these are now on separate lines and commas separate them. And it's quite a good way to get the data out of Excel without all the other standard stuff that goes around it. We've got these actual values from the cells. So this is our starting point, our class list. Clearly what we want to do is, having created something in Excel, saved it as a CSV file, we want to get Python then to interrogate this and pull this data in and think about it in some structure within Python that lends itself to the way we'd stored it within our actual spreadsheet. So that's what we're going to do. So let's see how we can read the data from the file. So here we've got a new file called file.py. I'm going to write the code for that, so I'll need a def main, and I'm going to call the function just called read file. And my read file function, what's it actually going to do? Read the code, I might actually call it. So the first thing it's going to do is open the file, so I'll get a file handle. When I open the file, what was my file called? Now I actually renamed it since I just created it. It's now called class_list dot comma separated variable, and I'm going to open it for reading. Okay, it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to get the data out of it. I'm just going to stick it into a variable called data. I'm going to read all the lines in one go, so I'm going to use read lines. Oops, sorry, I missed the file handle off. So remember, read lines reads everything in one go, so it's quite a handy structure. Then I'm going to close the file. And then I'm going to just print data just to see what it's read for me. So the file is saved in the same location as the actual class list file. So we just have a look where we are. Here we go. This is our Python file we just created in the same folder as our class list CSV file. So if we run that now, see what happens. Oh, again, I've got to call main. Run that and see what happens. So we read out our file. Remember what the file looked like. Let's just go and open it again so you can see what the file looks like. Adam Babbage 34, Caroline. So it looks, when you're looking at what's come out from the print, that clearly we've got our line as it stands with a line feed character at the end. That's our \n, and then the next one is a separate item. So they've come out as a list. Okay, and in the list, each element in this list, there's 4 elements which represent the 4 lines, are our 4 lines from our file. And all the elements are separated by commas, and they're all a string with the commas in there as part of that string. Okay, so if we've got them like that, we can quite easily iterate through that list. So we just go back to our Python file. There's our data. What we could quite easily do is say for row in data. So we're going to iterate through data because data is a list, it's got 4 elements in it. Print row. And that should print them all separately. So this will still print the whole list, and then this will iterate through them. Print them one at a time, hopefully. Yep, there you go. So we've got them one at a time. And again, if you'd watched an earlier video, why have we got 2 lines between them? One is because the line itself contains a line feed character, so that gets us to the next line. And then we're doing this as 4 separate prints, and at the end of every print statement there's a line feed anyway. So we've got them in this format, but they're 4 strings. Really, we want to be able to get to the first name, we want to be able to get to the surname, we want to be able to get to the score of each of these individual people. And really all I've got at the moment is a string with commas in there, which is giving me that information. If I want them as separate items, clearly what I've got to do is do a bit of work basically. I've got to break that string up where there are commas to turn it into, so to turn this particular string into a list of 3 strings. Well, we can do that, so let's have a look about how we go on and code that. Okay, but before we do, let's just think about this \n here. We said we needed to get rid of it. It's still here after the 34, that's why we're getting the extra new line. So first of all, let's just get rid of that \n. So again, if you've watched one of the earlier bits of coding, you know here as we got each of our individual items of data out, we've got row. So row is the actual string with the \n at the bottom. All I need to do in here is remove the last character from this particular line. So I can say, I'm just going to call it, say, cut row, because or truncated row is probably better. So truncated row is row, and we're just going to slice a string from the beginning to 1 before the end. So that's going to chop it off to, so obviously -1 is the last character. Remember, it only goes up to, but not including that last character. And then obviously here we want to print truncated row. Okay, so let's just check that that's worked. Okay, so there you go, we've got the 34 and there's now no extra space, so I've obviously chopped that off the end of there after the 34. So the only new line character now is because these are separate print statements. Okay, but these are still strings, we need to split those strings up. So what we do to do that is we're not going to print truncated row now. We're going to take a new variable called row data, create a new variable called row data, and this is going to be our truncated row, which we now know hasn't got the new line on the end. So remember, this is the Christian name, comma, surname, comma, and then the score as a text field, and I need to split that up based on where the commas are. So this is a string, truncated row. There is a method called split. What does split do? It will split this particular string up based on where the commas are, because that's my split character. So this is one string, it's going to split it based on the commas, so it's going to return however many strings there are separated by commas within here. Now we know there's 3, so this is actually going to return 3 strings. Well, if it's returning 3 items, what does it return them to row data as? Obviously as a list. So we'll print out row list and see what it does for us now. Oh, sorry, it's not called row list, it's called row data. There we go. So now you can see that whereas before it was a single string, Adam, Babbage, 34, it's now 3 separate items, Adam, Babbage and 34, all as 3 strings. So these are separate items in our list, and we have 4 separate lists. So if they're separate items in our list, can we actually print them out separately? Well, of course we can, because we can iterate through a list. So for item in row data, just say print item. And what we'll do is at the end of each of those we'll just give it an extra print, just so it gives me a space between each of those three chunks. Run that. And there we go. Adam, Babbage 34, Caroline Brown 56. So we've got them obviously as separate variables. So I can do anything I want with them now. I've extracted them. But that was quite hard work really. It's possible to do, but we've basically had to mess about with the data as we're reading it in as text and know and understand the CSV file and split it up. Well, is there an easy way to do it? Well, of course there is. So we'll look at that next. So we don't want any of all this kind of complicated stuff. Let's get rid of all that. So we still need to open the file as we did before and get our file handle. But now when we open the file, what we do is we use a new method called comma separated variable dot reader. And this needs to know the file handle that we've opened, and it needs to know what the delimiter is. And obviously in our case our delimiter is our comma. So it's kind of similar in some ways. Now CSV reader is clearly not a standard Python function that's there, so it comes in a module, so we have to import comma separated variable as a new module, and then we can use comma separated variable reader. So if this is going to go and read the file, what's it going to give us? Well, it's not going to give us the data directly as we saw before, so I'm just going to call it the raw data just so we can have a look what it actually is. And let's just print raw data. Again, sorry, we must remember to close the file. So we must remember to close the file. Now, you would think at this point now we could print raw data, but you'll see in a minute raw data is actually live from the file. We've not extracted the data at this point where we use raw data, so I'm going to print raw data actually in here so we can see what it is, and then we'll close the file. So let's just run that and see what it does. Okay, so I got an error. So looking at the error, it's in the CSV reader file handle delimiter is a comma. Delimiter is an invalid argument. It's not delimiter, it's delimiter. Typo there for me. So it's a delimiter, not a delimiter. Let's run that one again. Okay, and it returns a CSV reader object. Oh my goodness, what in the world is this? It's a bit of a weird idea. It doesn't return the data directly, but it returns a reader object. So this is actually a live file handler, effectively, knowing that it's a CSV file, into the live file. That's why I had to not close it yet. If we closed it, you would have just got the message file was closed. So this raw data here isn't actually the data, but it's a reference to the data. Well, if it's a reference to the data, how does that actually help us? Well, the way Python works is it's what we call an iterable reference. So we can iterate through this raw data. And if we iterate through it, we'll get it a line at a time. So we'll leave the print raw data in there for the moment, but if it's iterable, we should be able to do something like for row in raw data, print row. And then we'll close the file. So let's run that. And there you go. There's our object again, because we've still asked it to print it. But now when we look at the rows that are extracted as we iterate through, we get them directly as a list, because we told it there were commas in there. So it's pulled the 4 rows directly out for us immediately as list objects. So again, if we wanted to get to where we were before, if that's our particular row, rather, well, we'll print row again. What we can do in here for item in row, the row is obviously a list, so it's iterable, print item, and then we'll do a print again, just so we get a line between our 3 items. Let's run that. And there you go, we're getting the row itself, and then we're getting the 3 items in the row. So we've not had to mess about with stripping the /n off the end, we've not had to worry about splitting it. Clearly the CSV function has effectively done that for me. And that's one of the great things about Python, these modules that other people have written, because it's obviously quite common to want to read CSV files in. Somebody's already done all the hard work, so they publish a CSV module and then we can start using it in Python. And believe you me, there are thousands of modules out there to do. I would say anything you think you want to do, probably somebody's done it already and there's a module for it. Okay, so that's looked at reading files in. Obviously the other possibility is our program has created the data, so we can imagine a situation where we've got data stored about a class, we've put the names in and we've got the stores, and we want to write it out to a CSV file so that it can be opened in Excel and further processing done with it. So we'll look at that bit next. Okay, to save a bit of time, I've typed a bit in here, so let's just quickly talk through this. I've hashed out the call to read file. I've created ourselves a new function called write CSV, and I haven't written anything to the CSV yet, don't worry. We're just setting up the data. Now obviously this would have been prepared elsewhere in the program, but I'm just putting it in here for simplicity. So I create an empty list called class data, and then I append to the class data list the first item, and the first item is a list itself, a list of 3 parts. Ahmed, Farouk, 34. It's a list because it's in square brackets, it's got commas between it, and then I append another list, and another list. So our class data is a list made up of 4 items. The first item is a list made up of 3 items, Ahmed, Farouk and 34. The second item is a list made up of 3 items. The third item is a list made up of 3 items. And the fourth item is a list made up of 3 items. So then, just to show that, obviously because class data is a list, we can iterate through it. So we can go for row in class data. So it will pull out 1 item from the list at a time and print the row. So let's just run that, and there we go. At the bottom there you can see it's printing out Ahmed, Farouk 34, Alicia Shahid 56, Ewan Zimming 76 and Carl Pearson at 28. So we've got our data in the right format here. It's the same format that we know that the reader was producing. So if we've got it in this format already, we can then use a similar idea and a method out of the CSV module to write that data. We're going to look at how we do that next. Okay, so in the same way we did before, we need to open the file. So we get our file handle from opening the file. We're going to call this our new class list, and just confirming in the folder at the moment. Yeah, just got my class list, so no file in there at the moment. We're opening obviously this time for writing, so it will write the file. So the next thing to do is we've got to invoke the CSV writer module. So writer is the function I want to do. It's coming in as part of the import from importing CSV there at the top. We kind of kick off the writer module, and what we need to do is we need to tell it the file that we wish to write to. So we've got the file handle for that already, and because obviously it's a CSV file, we need to tell it what the delimiter is, and obviously our delimiter is a comma. So CSV writer, now calling this particular method, what it does is it returns to us an object pointer into the file that then we can use to actually write the data. So I'm going to call this object reference. Maybe I'll call it file reference, or CSV file reference, because now it's for CSV files. So it's actually this object now that I'm using, CSV file reference, when I actually come to write the data. So if I want to write data, I use that reference, CSV file reference. And what do I want to do? I want to write a row. Now what do I want to write in that row? Well, I want to write one of the actual rows. Obviously there are 4 rows here, so I actually want to write one of those rows, which means really I ought to take that line there and put it here within the loop. So as I'm iterating through, getting my 4 rows from the class data, so my class data is all the information, getting it a row at a time, I'm printing it so I can see it, and then I'm writing that row to the CSV file. And obviously then when I finish doing all of that, I then need to close the file with the original file handle. And close the file. Okay, let's see what that does. So it's printed those lines out, because remember we're still printing here within row. Let's have a look in the folder, and we have a new file called new class. And let's have a look at our new class list then. So first of all, we'll open it in Notepad. Brilliant, it's shown it as a CSV type file, so it all looks okay. If we double click it, it should open it in Excel or LibreOffice, because I'm on here. Notice it's got an extra line in here. It doesn't look like I've got an option using my separators, which are commas, which it's picking up, but it's not getting the lines right. So we can see it's got some extra lines in here. We just need to have a look at that. It's one of the things you kind of have to mess about with a little bit sometimes to get these right. So one of the things that we're able to do when we first open the file is actually specify in here what our new line delimiter is. So if I say a new line is a null string, let's just run that again. Keyword can't be an expression, I've obviously done something. Oh, put a dot rather than a comma. So it's printed it out again. Let's have a look at the file. Just check it in Notepad. Yeah, that looks okay. And now open it in LibreOffice. And because we've specified a new line was a null string, obviously whatever was going in there to put the new lines in was now spread them out neatly over 4 lines. So we've created our Excel spreadsheet. So that's it. Now we've looked at how we can read from a CSV file, opening it up, getting the raw data handle. Now remember, that's not the actual raw data. We iterate through the raw data and getting it a row at a time to get our information. And when we come to write a CSV file, again we've created the data that would have been created elsewhere in the program. We get the file handle as normal. We call the CSV the .writer method here, which gives us a file reference again in, and we use that file reference here with the write row method to write in a row at a time as a list, knowing what the delimiter is, and that creates our CSV file. So that's basically how we use CSV files. Okay, hope it made sense. Thanks, bye.